Good, cool. Um, so as I mentioned in the email and last week, it's probably better to look at today's class and next week as sort of one longer class, just sort of split up into two. We're going to be working toward, restorative poses into some pranayama. To start, instead of seated, and I've had us do this before, you can get a towel or a blanket, have it from roughly this shape, and then roll fairly tightly at one end. Again, you can do it with a towel, you can do it with a blanket. And sort of depending on the flexibility of your chest, you can decide how much roll you want. But once you have the roll, you're going to put it on your mat and come to lying down where your shoulder blades are pretty much subdivided right on that roll. And then you slide yourself back so you have this nice space in the upper chest. Your arms, your armpits, your elbows should be past the line of the roll. And then you can just straighten out the legs. So you can see again, it's just sort of creating this capacity in the upper chest. My shoulders are on the ground, my head is on the ground. And again, it's up to you how deep that roll is. If it feels like it's too much, you can just undo it a little bit. If it feels like you're not getting enough, you can do that. But what's important is that the roll is right under the tips of the shoulder blades. So when you're lying down, you should feel the shoulder blades pushing up towards the ceiling. The bottom tips of the shoulder blades should be almost digging into the back chest. Again, forcing this more capacity in the upper front chest. And you're going to be here for a couple of minutes, so don't hesitate to take a little extra time to really feel right in the posture. The hips are in the ground, the legs are straight. But again, the shoulders are just lightly, are touching the floor. They're over the roll. And again, the roll is just pushing the bottom tips of the shoulder blades more towards the ceiling. And as you're here, now it's sort of allowing your body to conform over this support. So you begin to really try to encourage the muscles of the spine, the intercostal muscles, the muscles that sort of connect the rib cage, allowing all that area to release. The abdominal muscles, especially when we work on back bends, I've mentioned this before, they tend to want to constrict and contract as a sort of protection mechanism. Because you're lying here, really soften the sides of the belly button, the sides of the navel, get the abdominal muscles to lengthen and release, to encourage more of this expansion of the upper chest. Begin to allow the time while you're in here. I often mention time and gravity. Let time and gravity do their job. Where you really allow yourself to release into the support so that the spine begins to conform more over that shape. And almost on a moment by moment basis, you can sort of slowly feel a sense of release where the body is conforming over this shape, where this capacity in the upper chest is becoming to feel, is slowly over time feeling a little bit more natural, perhaps less intense, just more innate to the shape of the body. Relax the throat, relax the jaw, relax the tongue. I've used the word samskras before, impressions. And I mentioned this usually more in sort of a psychological or sort of psychological approach, whereas in this case, the impression is that rolled blanket underneath the back chest. And it's up to you to sort of allow more and more familiarity and a level of comfort in this new shape that the body is taking. I've mentioned this before, how this area of the chest is very vulnerable. So there's almost a natural sort of instinctual desire to protect this area. So sometimes just having the chest open in this way can be, like I said, can be a little bit exposing. So there's a psychological and a physical connection that's sort of tied to the shape of the pose. Just another minute or so, not much longer. But we're going to want to find some of the same sort of emphasis in the space in the chest in other poses. So again, try to allow yourself to become familiar with this shape. Let the body conform and really observe the capacity of the upper chest, the feeling that the ribs, each rib is sort of spreading away from its neighbor above and below. Everybody bend your legs, take your feet to the floor, and then just roll to your side, roll to your right side. Gently press the hands down and come up and move directly to child's pose, Adho Mukha Virasana. You can clear the roll. Big toes together, knees apart, reach the chest and sternum forward. Bring the head down. If the head doesn't come to the floor, you can get a block or a blanket to support the head. The hands should be about shoulder width apart. Extend the arms overhead. But see now, again, so I talked about impressions. See if you can almost imagine that the roll is in that same place, where it's gently pushing sort of the back bottom tips of the shoulder blades into the back chest a little bit. So even though we're in this forward bend, we're trying to find a subtle sense of concavity in the back body. Reaching the chest and sternum forward. Bottom ribs forward, sternum towards the hands, towards the head. But again, see if you can just, even though the shape is very different, see if you can feel, just ask those bottom tips of the shoulder blades to push in a little bit to the back chest to encourage, again, more expansion of the front chest. And then from here, we'll go directly to Adho Mukha Svanasana, downward facing dog. As I sometimes ask you guys to do, come to plank pose for a moment. If you're unsure, you can just look at the screen. So yeah, plank pose more or less. Now grab the edges of the mat. Take your hands, grab firmly to the edges of the mat. When you go into the pose, look forward. Again, if you're unsure, you can look at how I'm doing it. Instead of sort of leading with the head, you want to go into the pose looking forward the entire time. So instead of the head coming down, your upper chest is more inclined to release. So from plank pose, don't look down. Stretch the mat forward to bring yourself into the pose. And again, it's almost as if that rolled blanket is leading, that the bottom tips of the shoulder blades are where you're trying to sort of lead the momentum of the pose. The head will eventually go down. Don't worry about letting go of the mat for a moment. Stretch the mat. Try to tear the mat forwards if you can. Soften the base of the neck so that the head hangs now. Yeah, there it is, Kathleen. Yep. Keep the legs straight, press the tops of the thighs back. If you feel like your hands are able, if you're able to just go to the classic position with the hands, you're welcome to do that. If you feel like you're slipping, you're welcome to keep holding on to the edges of the mat. But there should be, again, that intensity of pushing the thighs back to find length in the spine. And again, this sort of searching to find that bottom tips of the shoulder blades, pushing in a little bit in that same spot where the roll was, which is sort of forcing more opening of the upper front chest. The armpit chest, as it's called. You should feel the skin of the armpits stretching a little bit. Soften again the neck, let the head hang. I am keeping you here for a little longer than usual, but just know that in the last half hour of the class is going to be very relaxed. So remain present now. Really push the tops of the thighs back. Work on finding more and more expansion in what I call the armpit chest. So your upper armpits, like I said, are really stretching. The skin of the armpit should feel like it's getting longer and encouraging this upper chest to release. And of course, and as I mentioned in the email, the practice of yoga is trying to find comfort in discomfort. So even this pose, and these poses are not necessarily comfortable, but we're trying to sort of find a place, a state of comfort, of acceptance in this slightly uncomfortable position. Not much longer, a couple more seconds. Good, rest in child's pose once again. Big toes together, take your knees apart. Take a few breaths. If the shoulders are tired, you can take your arms down by your sides if that's more comfortable. But just remain here for a couple of breaths. Good. Press the hands down to come up. We're going to go immediately to separated legs forward bend, Prasarita Padottanasana, this one. If you want a chair, we're going to be here again, like we did last week. We're going to be here for a little bit. So if you want a chair for head support, if you want to use your couch, if you have something, blocks, feel free to stack blocks. I do want your head supported, which is to say the head is resting on something, but the body is not resting on the head. So find the stuff that you need for Prasarita Padottanasana, separated legs forward bend, so you can be supported and stay here for about 2 or 3 minutes. Once you have your setup, you can just separate your feet nice and wide, have your hands on your waist for a moment. Stand straight. So again, so much of what we're doing is about trying to maintain some sense of capacity in this area of the upper chest. With your hands on your waist, just take the elbows towards each other. So suddenly there's a horizontal expansion of the chest. Lift the chest and sternum up, keep the elbows going towards each other, keeping the legs straight, begin to bend forward. Look forward as you push the thighs back, take your hands to the support, the floor. Look forward. Now, again, my hands, I took my hands to the ground, but my legs are still doing all the work to keep me supported. I'm not falling onto the hands. Push the thighs back. Reach your sternum and collarbones forward as the inner groins and inner thighs push towards the wall behind you. So fight to find a sense of extension in the front chest. Keeping the front chest open, begin to lower down. You can take your head down to the floor, to whatever support you're using. If it's a chair, if it's a couple of stacked blocks, if it's your couch, find that support. But again, the weight of the body should still remain 90% at least on the feet at all times. So you don't want to feel like you're falling forward. You don't want to feel like your hips are going forward of your feet. The hips should more or less be directly in line with the feet. And the head should be resting supported, not supporting. Straighten out the legs if you can. Push the tops of the thighs back. Gently push the hands into the floor to ask the back chest, the skin of the back chest, to go away from the base of the skull. So you want to feel this movement of that upper back chest instead of it crowding the back of the head, the base of the skull. Instead of getting that sense of sort of constriction there, you want to ask the flesh of the upper back chest, the skin, the musculature to go away from the base of the skull. And notice over time, we've been here not even a minute, about 40 seconds. But even this, you probably got a little heavier in the head. You might have found a little more flexibility, so it's up to you to decide whether you want to maybe adjust the stance of the feet farther or closer, or if you want to adjust the support that you have, maybe a little bit lower because you were sort of beginning to release. But even here, this is subtle attempt to find that similar pushing of the back shoulder blades into the back chest a little bit, the similar place where that roll is sort of pushing, even though you're in this very different posture. Keeping the legs straight, relax the face, relax the throat. Embrace the state of inversion where the head is below the heart. We begin to straighten out the arms. Walk the hands forward a little bit. And then you can sort of heel toe the feet back in towards each other. And then gently come up. Cool. You're going to want either a block or a couple of blankets and an additional blanket. So briefly, let me show you what we're going to do. Now we're already heading into more reclining poses, heading into the pranayama stuff. So this is going to be, we're just basically doing a chest opening pose, reclining sort of mountain pose. You can see my legs are straight. The block is behind me, and I have the blankets. You can have several blankets if you want. You can have 2 blocks if you want for head support. Let me just show you the shape of what we're getting to. So the legs are straight. This block, depending on whatever height you want, you can have it, at any one of the various heights, but it's going to fall more or less in that same place where the bottom tips of the shoulder blades are just being pushed into the back chest, and then the head should not float. So you can fold up the blanket for head support, but you still want to have the chest open. And it's up to you to decide how intense you want this pose to be based on the height of the blocks and the height of the head. So again, you're in this position, you're sitting in more or less in Dandasana. If your block or rolled blanket or whatever it is behind you, you come to lying down where that block is falling more or less in a similar place where the roll was. And then it's up to you. If your head is sort of floating high up, you're going to want to get some support. Depending on how deep you want to be, you can increase or lower the head support as well as the chest support. But the head should be supported. It should not float. And don't hesitate to take a little extra time to really find the proper placement of the support underneath you. I often describe it as, of course, our hearts are a little bit to our left, but you kind of want that block to be supporting directly behind the heart. More centered, but in that similar position, because much of what we're trying to do, again, is create space in this area, making room for the heart. And quite frankly, if it feels a little intense or uncomfortable at first, that might not be wrong. Because over time, again, the gravity will begin to start to create this samskras, this impression in the back chest. Yes, and I see you guys making adjustments. I encourage that. If it feels like it's too much, lower the block a little bit to start. If you feel like your head, again, is not supported enough, add blankets as you need to. If you feel like your head is too supported, where the chest isn't open, you can lower the blankets. It's almost like you just fold leaves of the blanket ends away to go slightly deeper if you want to. But I've mentioned this before. If you look at photographs of BKS Iyengar practicing yoga, especially in his later years, in the last 20, 30 years, he actually, his 104th birthday, I think, was a couple days ago, 103rd. But if you look at those, again, some of the pictures of him practicing as he got older, so much of what he did was oriented around making shapes like this, where the upper chest is deeply open. Because as we get older, the opposite happens. Our chest begins to close, and what happens is the internal organs, the lungs, the heart, begin to get constricted. So much of what we try to do as we get older in particular is to keep some sense of flexibility, capacity in this area of the upper chest. So there's not as much constriction on the heart. There's not as much constriction on the lungs and the other internal organs. Relax the throat. Relax the base of the skull. What you find is, in order to encourage release of this area, that if you start to relax the hips and the groins, if you start to relax it's as if you're relaxing the parts of the body just outside this area of the chest. And though that release begins to encourage more release of the chest itself, almost working sort of from the extremities towards the center. If you relax the knees, the thighs, the hips, the groins, the spine will begin to let go. If you relax even the elbows, the forearms, and the upper arms, the upper chest will begin to release more. And it's not just a vertical expansion, there's this sort of coiling of the upper chest. There should be that horizontal sense as well, where the collarbones, again, are broadening a little bit away from each other. It almost feels like the sides of the chest are heavy. The right shoulder, right outer chest is heavy and wants to release to the right. The left shoulder, left outer chest is heavy and wants to release to the left. Now, coming out of this pose, you want to try to come out sort of with an open chest. So you don't want to lie sideways. It helps if you just take your arms to the sides, the body, grab the edges of the mat, let your forearms sort of do the work to push you down to come back up. Try to let the arms do the work. You come up, yep, in that straight position. Good. We're going to move directly to supported butterfly pose, Baddha Konasana, reclining Baddha Konasana. So again, back to your blanket. You want to open your blanket or towel up pretty much completely so it's this shape. Get your second blanket and or towel and have it just folded up long way. So again, so we're going to be looking for just a little bit of chest support. So you have this spine blanket, this long thin one for you to lie on. If you have another blanket or a block or something, you can or towel, you can use it for head support. So you can see spine, head support. This blanket, this towel, whatever you're using, you'll sit near the edge, bring the soles of the feet to touch. So butterfly pose, and then you're going to get this towel to go around the ankles and come to lying down. So again, you can see, so I'm in butterfly pose. I got the towel around the front of the ankles, and I can use it to pull the heels closer in. And then I can get the sort of the tails, the ends of the blanket to sort of support the outer thighs. Supta Baddha Konasana, reclining band angle pose. There might be a few of you who actually have bolsters, and you're welcome to use a bolster if you prefer for chest support. But again, the position should be that the blanket is around the front of the ankles and you sort of pull the blanket to get the heels to go towards the groins. And then you can use the ends of the blanket to sort of support the outer thighs. The chest should be resting on the support, the head is on the support, and then you can just sort of relax here. And I like seeing you guys take a little extra time to get this right, because all of these poses, you're going to be here for a little longer. It's worth taking those extra few seconds to feel that sense of balance and comfort, because like I said, you're going to, all these poses, we're here for a little bit longer. So take that time to get the proper chest support. The head should, maybe if you can get it, should be a little bit above the chest, almost like you're looking down. And then the arms can just be out a little bit away from the body, but the palms facing up. Roll the, as I talk about in other classes, even here, get a sense of sort of the external rotation of the arms. So your biceps are going a little bit away. You should feel, again, this release of the upper chest. You may notice that it feels as if the buttocks flesh is going up towards the lower back. Before you get too settled, you might want to use your hands and just manually push that flesh of the lower back and buttocks flesh towards the heels. So you get this nice sort of clarity in that lumbar spine. So anatomically speaking, the lungs are located in the upper chest, upper middle chest. And as I said before, just a few minutes ago, sometimes if we want to really feel a true release in the area of the chest and the spine, we almost have to work from outwards in. And what's interesting is that if there's tightness and gripping in the groins, it actually is more difficult to breathe. So this is why we're actually doing this pose, Supta Baddha Konasana right now, to create space in the hips and the groins, because that will in fact encourage more sort of ability to breathe in more depth in the pranayama. And yeah, we're heading there. And the only instruction I'm going to give you right now as you're lying here, and I just sort of gave you a brief anatomy of where the lungs are, and I'm telling, and I know that the instruction that this is not anatomically correct, but begin to breathe into the groins. Without force, without any intensity, just see if you can turn those words into something that makes sense to you and your body. Breathe into the groins. So it's almost as if you're imagining that the lungs go all the way down to where the body meets the legs. And interestingly enough, at the same time, though, the lungs do go surprisingly high up into the chest. The top ends of the lungs to go up even slightly behind the collarbones. So now, again, without any sense of force, so I'm asking you to sort of look at these two opposite ends of the torso and breathing. No force, no restriction of the breath, but just see if you can breathe more into the groins, see if you can breathe more into behind the collarbones. You don't need to hold the breath. Once you've made that inhalation, just do immediate exhalation. But begin to use the breath as a way to sort of test the capacity of the torso and the lungs, just a little bit. And again, by addressing these opposite ends, the top and bottom of the torso, you're just sort of creating a sense of expansion, and sort of your awareness of the lung capacity hopefully is growing slightly. Relax the throat, relax the base of the skull. I mentioned this last week. Generally, when I begin a class, we usually sit straight and tall. You hear my usual instructions. Relax the muscles of the face. Relax the forehead, the eyebrows, the temples. Soften the jaw, soften the tongue. And then I say, without force or strain, let your inhalations be a little bit longer, let your exhalations be a little bit more complete, and let your awareness, really your tactile awareness, feel the breath as it moves in and out of the body. The simple truth is the first 5 minutes of my classes are probably closer to what true yoga practice is than the remaining rest of the class and all the asanas and all the poses. All the asanas and poses in many ways are meant to allow us to be able to sit straight and tall for longer periods of time and remain still with less discomfort. So as you're lying here, yeah, begin to sort of incorporate the ideas that I almost always give at the beginning of classes. Again, letting your sense of touch move the inside of the body so you can be more sensitive to the movement of the breath as it enters and leaves, where you can feel that cool air as it comes in through the nose. Again, Ujjayi breath, as I mentioned last week, Ujjayi breath can be used in almost any, is one of the few practices of pranayama that can be done almost any time. So begin to sort of incorporate this now, where you lift that soft palate of the back of the throat up. And yes, most of them pretty much, if you're able to, unless you're very congested, all the breathing should be going through the nose. And you lift that soft palate up and you begin to try to tune into the sound and the feeling of the breath as it moves in and out. You begin to play with this where you're not, where it's always this very delicate thing where we don't want to overdo the breathing or underdo it. And the nervous system is your sort of gauge. Another minute, not much longer. If you feel like maybe the outer thighs have been released and too supported, you can begin to reduce the amount of support of the outer thighs for this last minute if you want. Maybe you found more space in the hips. But again, as you're lying here, almost imagine that the entire torso is the lungs, and see if you can really expand where you're breathing, like I said, down into the groins, out to the sides and into the upper chest, and try not to let it be too forced. If you notice that your body begins to get tense, that the face begins to harden, you're probably trying too hard. To bring yourself out of the pose, you want to take your hands to the outsides of the knees. The inner groins have done a lot of stretching so that your arms do the work to help bring the legs together. You can remove the support if you need to help bring the legs together, and then just roll to your sides. Stay on your right side for a breath or two. You can bend the legs closer to the chest if you need to for a moment, and then push the hands down to come up to sitting. So we're going to be heading now into sort of the supported pranayama practices. Before we do, I want to show you a couple things. For one, this is Light on Yoga, BKS Iyengar's book. You can see how thick it is. It's got all the poses, as you guys know, 370 something poses. This is the book that he did after that one, Light on Pranayama. And this is just about breathing. Look how thick this book is. It's the exact same size as this one, just as thick. And this is just about breathing. So one thing this tells you is that BKS Iyengar, right there, has put a lot of time and effort into learning how breathing works. And again, I would recommend, this is a really fascinating book. If you're interested, Light on Pranayama, it's really, really very good. What I do want to show you briefly is just the posture, that a couple of pictures of sort of the posture, because there are going to be some variations that you're going to be taking here. So you can see, I want to emphasize this picture here. If you look closely, you can see the support he's using. Now, chances are you don't have the wooden planks and all that kind of thing, but you can see the shape that he's making where his chest is supported and his head is supported. Now, there are variations of this. There's another one right here, a little bit different. It doesn't have the eye bag or the eye wrap. But again, you can see that his head is slightly above his chest. His chest is well open. His outer shoulders are sort of released to the sides. So this is where again, that's the general posture we're trying to make for the next 25 minutes of class, 20 minutes of class. This is the shape we're trying to make with the body. And I want to give you some options. Some of you might have the bolster. Some people find that the bolster is too much. It's too much of a lift. So looking just at this setup, you can see, okay, so this is one variation. So if the bolster works for you, and I'm giving you these options now because next week you're going to be doing the same thing. You want to be in a place where you can be comfortable. Posture one, if you have a bolster, you can see I have a little space here. Lying down, the head is supported. So I'm in very much the similar shape that he was. If that's too much, like I said, sometimes the bolster is too much. This is where you get blankets or towels. And then you can just, from this position, fold it in half again. And then you have your support. 2 blankets if you want to go a little deeper. Sometimes instead of just folding in half, maybe an accordion fold, so it's a little thicker. And what you want to do here is stagger. So there's almost a step here. And then you have your head support as you need it. Personally, my favorite setup is this one, the 3 blankets. Again, get the supports you have, like grab some towels, grab some blankets. The important point, as you saw in the picture, in the photograph of Iyengar, is that again, the chest is lifted and open. The shoulders should release a little bit out to the sides. The head should be slightly above the chest. So you don't want to have the head sort of below the chest. The head support should just barely touch the shoulders. So there's a little bit of a gaze of the head of the face towards the body. And this is the shape you're going to make. Find the equipment that you need that works best for you. Like I said, you're going to be here for a little bit. Also, if you want to put a blanket over you, if you want to cover yourself with something, you're going to be here for, like I said, another about 15 or 20 minutes. Feel free to put socks on. Feel free to put also an eye bag if you like, or if you have a towel or something you want to put over your eyes, you're welcome to do that. Everything we're going to be doing, you don't need to see anything. It's just really tuning in. Make sure that you can hear me. I'll try to be clear, but you're not really going to be looking at the screen. At this point, you're just going to be listening. A couple of things I want to emphasize before you get too comfortable is that you don't want your sacrum budged up right up against the support. You want to have a little space. You want to give yourself 3 or 4 inches from your sacrum to where the support starts. Because it might not be noticeable at first, but after about 5-10 minutes, you might feel unnecessary pressure on the sacrum. So you give yourself that space. Push the buttocks flesh, not just to the heels, but try to pull the right buttocks flesh more to the right, the left buttocks flesh more to the left. So you're getting more of the bones of the hips and the pelvis to release towards the floor. You're really clearing the flesh out of the way. And as you're getting settled, you may want to sort of take one hand and reach behind the other side of the back chest and spread the back chest flesh away. So your right hand reaches behind the left armpit, pulls the flesh out, vice versa. So you get the sense of broadening of the skin of the center of the chest, back chest, away from each other. And then again, place yourself in this way where there's a subtle external rotation of the arms where the hands naturally want to face up towards the ceiling. And I see the little adjustments and I encourage that. Because again, as you're lying here, you might notice suddenly that you might not notice in the first minute, but then maybe 2 or 3 minutes in, you might feel a little bit like you're constricted on one side or you're falling a little bit too much to the right or to the left. Don't hesitate to make the subtle adjustments so you feel truly, truly centered. I've mentioned this before, within the practice of Iyengar yoga, this style of yoga, we learn asanas, we learn poses first, and then we move on to the more subtle practices of pranayama and again, farther into the more subtle practices of yoga towards meditation. But Iyengar emphasizes that the practice of pranayama is a very subtle practice and it's very easy for us to go too far without realizing it. In the same way you can overstretch your hamstring, you can begin to sort of overextend your ability to breathe, your capacity. And this can have a negative effect on the nervous system. So when we start to work on pranayama, when we start to practice pranayama, we are encouraged to start in shavasana first, in supported corpse pose. So this is where I want you to go right now. I want you to really try to allow yourself to sort of bring yourself to that state of shavasana. So relax the feet, the ankles, soften the calves, the musculature over the shins, let that release. Soften the knees, the kneecaps. Feel the thighs softening. Feel the quadriceps, the muscles around the thigh bones, releasing, falling away from the bones. And then begin to work up in the hips and the groins again. Really release this area. Find softness there. Relax the abdomen. Try to begin to soften those lower internal organs and ask them to release a little closer to the floor. Let that area feel heavy. And because of the support that you're on, there should be this subtle sense of sort of the right side of the chest falling a little to the right, the left side of the chest falling a little bit to the left. The outer shoulders, again, should be releasing more towards the floor. So there's this broadening in the entire front of the chest. Allow yourself to succumb to that pull of gravity. So you feel the outer shoulders being a little bit heavier. Even a broadening in the area of the neck and the throat. The sides of the jaw. Even sort of the sides of the ears. Releasing a little more towards the floor. And we bring ourselves to Shavasana first when we're starting to learn pranayama, because the tension that sometimes comes to the body as we work on these pranayama is sort of a giveaway that maybe we're trying too hard. We can use sort of the release, the state of the body that you're in now as a barometer as you begin to work on pranayama. When tension comes to the body, that tells you chances are maybe you're trying a little too hard. And I didn't mention the face. Relax the forehead, the eyebrows, the temples, again, as I often instruct at the very beginning of classes. And with your eyes closed, or even if they're not entirely closed, just let your gaze go, whatever feels comfortable for you, but let the gaze of the eyes go a little bit towards the body instead of towards the brain. So we bring ourselves to the state of Shavasana, a very deep state of release first. So we become more sensitive to how the body responds to breathing. I'm going to talk about breathing, but I don't want you to do anything right now. I just want you to relax. And I say that right off the bat because, as I've mentioned before, pranayama is subtle practice, and quite frankly, we've all lived our entire lives quite well without telling the breath what to do. And then we get into yoga, and we get into pranayama, and we start sort of letting it, like the ego suddenly decides that it knows how to control the breath. And it's always this practice of humbling and really allowing ourselves to succumb to the intelligence, the consciousness is the word I've used sometimes, of the body itself. And I mentioned fairly regularly the idea of how the in-breath and the out-breath are connected to different parts of the nervous system. The in-breath is connected to the sympathetic nervous system. The out-breath is connected to the parasympathetic nervous system. The in-breath, the sympathetic nervous system is fight or flight. It's activating, it's awakening. The out-breath is the opposite. It's a rest and digest. It's calming. What I find amazing in my own practice is, and just sort of, if you can step away a little bit, you can realize how drastically different the effect on the nervous system and on the mind is when you're in an inhalation compared to when you're on an exhalation. It happens so much in our daily lives that we don't think about it, but it really is. It's amazing. It's this almost listing like a boat from one side to the other. As you inhale, you tend towards one aspect of psychology or nervous system. When on the other end of the breath, it's almost like you're hitting another aspect. Slightly moving sort of from one side to the other.
So we start by just sort of humbling ourselves to this observation. I'm going to encourage you now, without changing the body and without forcing anything, begin to sort of incorporate the Ujjayi breath, where the soft palate is lifted, you're breathing through the nose, you'll hear and feel the breath as it comes in, you allow the chest to lift and expand, and then you do a long, slow, continuous exhalation. Try to hear that sound of the breath. I would recommend just doing one and then going back immediately to normal breath. But observe the state of the body. Even just doing that one longer, deeper breath sometimes makes us constrict, brings tension to the face, to the hips, to the shoulders. So after you did just that one long Ujjayi breath, observe the body, reset, re-relax, re-release. And this is what the practice is for the next few minutes, where you really observe what just that one long, slow Ujjayi breath does to the body. And each of us works at our own pace. So the instructions I'm giving from here to the end of the class essentially are done at your own pace. Each body is different. Our lung capacities are different. So when I give you these instructions, you don't necessarily have to follow along in time. It's just taking the ideas and the concepts. But as you're lying here again, just find Shavasana, let the breath be natural. You'll notice that quite frankly, oftentimes, as soon as we start thinking about the breath, we start getting less breath because we try to control it. So again, you have to sort of humble yourself to the consciousness and the understanding of the body. It knows how to breathe. It's done quite well without you interfering. But at your own pace and when you're ready, do another Ujjayi breath. All pranayama starts with exhalation. So as you're lying here, softening the body, exhale all the air from the lungs. Lift the soft palate, long, slow inhalation. Feel the lungs, the chest, the abdomen expand, not just vertically, but horizontally. And then a long, slow, continuous exhalation. Try to let that exhalation be a little longer than the inhalation. Keep hearing the sound of the breath. And then once you complete that exhalation, just go back to normal breathing. Forget about the breath and just go back to relaxing the body once again. And again, you may notice that just even that one breath, that one long breath, suddenly maybe tension came to the face, the gaze of the eyes moved up towards the brain. It's up to you to just sort of reset and re-release. Like I said, this is sort of the practice, the cycle we go through for a while in working on pranayama. Again, at your own pace, when you're ready, you exhale all the air from the lungs. Feel the soft palate lifted, slow inhalation. Hear the sound of the breath as it moves in. Try to keep that sound consistent. Feel that warm, moist air touching the back of the throat, touching the interior of the lungs, and then that long, continuous exhalation. Go back to normal breathing. And then assess once again, was there tension that happened just in that one long, deep Ujjayi breath? Re-soften, re-broaden again the collarbones away from each other. Re-soften the throat, re-soften the surface of the face, the skin of the face. As you're lying here, I just want you to sort of visualize the bottom line of your rib cage, 360 degrees, all the way around. So you can maybe take your awareness for a moment to the back bottom rib cage where it meets the spine, and then the whole line of lower ribs until it comes around and meets the sternum. So get that awareness and just sort of connect your mind to this part of the anatomy. And now this next Ujjayi breath, I want you to try to really breathe into that entire 360-degree line of that lower rib cage. So when you inhale this time, really feel the breath pushing into the lower back ribs, feel the side ribs expand a little bit. The sternum, that whole lower line of the rib cage expand, do a long, slow, continuous exhalation outwards. Go back to normal breathing, re-relax the body. We're trying to explore the capacity of the lungs. We're trying to sort of look for the little dark spaces that might not normally receive breath. And we're trying to find a way to bring breath and awareness to those particular sort of cavities of the lungs that maybe don't get addressed. Again, when you're ready, relax everywhere, soften everywhere. Exhale completely, but then begin to try to inhale and breathe into the line of the rib cage, bottom line of the ribs, all the way around, back, chest, side ribs, front ribs, sternum should lift and expand. And then that long, slow, continuous exhalation outwards again. Go back to normal breathing, re-relax the face, the forehead, reset the gaze of the eyes towards the body once again. Has tension come to the body in any parts? If it has, can you relax? Can you release? So I've been sort of giving you these markers. Earlier on in class, I said, breathe into the groins. And then I went and said, breathe in behind the collarbones. And now I gave you a little more of this horizontal work of the line of the rib cage. So it's up to you as you're lying here to begin to explore at your own pace, using Ujjayi breath, explore the capacity of your lungs. Try to let the breath touch different parts that maybe, again, you're not accustomed to touching. As you're lying here, you have this tactile pressure along the back bottom rib cage and the back chest. Practice breathing into there, almost resisting, pushing against that pressure. But again, you guys know this is at your own pace. Long, slow inhalation, long, slow exhalation. After you've done one, just relax again and just let your body sort of just absorb what that one pranayama did, one Ujjayi breath did. And it's this constant act of letting go. Hardness comes to the face, hardness comes to the throat. We're going to move now to doing sequential Ujjayi breaths, if you can. I want to make a couple disclaimers. If there's any point where you feel anxious, if there's any point where you're feeling like you're not getting enough breath, where there's tension that's happening in the body, just forget about the breath completely. Like I said, you've done quite well your entire life without telling the breath what to do. However, if you want to try to begin to incorporate sequential Ujjayi breaths, I'll talk you through it. You'll go at your own pace. Start by bringing yourself to that state of Shavasana where the body is completely released. Soften the forehead, the throat, the spine, the hips, the legs, the arms. And then when you're ready, exhale all the air from the lungs completely. And then do a long, slow, continuous inhalation. Feel the breath pressing into the back ribs, the chest. Breathe into the groins, breathe into the upper chest. Then do a long, slow, continuous exhalation outwards. Hear the sound of the breath. Keep it consistent. Exhale completely. And if you feel like you're still in a state of release, repeat. Long, slow inhalation. Encourage the breath to touch the different parts of the interior of the lungs, back ribs, side ribs. Breathing all up into the collarbones, all the way up into the collarbones, and then that long, slow, continuous exhalation outwards. If you feel like you're not interfering with the breath, if you feel relaxed and released, a third time, exhale all the air from the lungs, long, slow inhalation. Observe the texture of the breath touching the interior of the lungs. The cool air warms up in the body. Long, slow, continuous exhalation outwards. Hear the sound of the breath. After you've done those three, go back to normal breathing. And again, just sort of assess the body. What parts, chances are, tension came at some point to some part of the body. And it's up to you to just sort of re-relax and re-release and constantly sort of bring yourself back to the state of Shavasana, the starting point. One more round of trying to do 3 Ujjayi breaths in a row if you want to. Again, if you feel like it's interfering, if you're not getting enough breath, you just forget about the breath. But at your own pace, if you want to, when you're ready, soften again everywhere. Exhale completely, and then a long, slow inhalation. Feel horizontal as well as vertical expansion of the chest. Feel the breath coming all the way up to the collarbones, where the collarbones lift and broaden, and then that long, slow, continuous exhalation. Again, hear the sound of the breath. Keep it consistent. Exhale completely. Repeat. Long, slow, Ujjayi breath. Feel the texture of the breath as it moves in the body. Feel the expansion of the rib cage. Long, slow exhalation outwards. Pause. Repeat one last time at your own pace. Keeping the body completely released, completely soft. Long, slow inhalation with the soft palate lifted so you can hear the sound of the breath as it moves through the body. Breathe all the way to the collarbones. Long, slow, continuous exhalation outwards. Go immediately back to normal breath. Assess the body. Bring yourself to that state of Shavasana, true and complete release. And just as you're lying here, in terms of comparisons, from the beginning of class, when I had you lie on the roll, to now where you're on the support, where the chest is even more open and more lifted. Hopefully, just over the last hour, the capacity of the chest has increased. This position that you're in, where this upper chest is more open and lifted, will hopefully this samskras, this impression, will stick with you for a little bit. Everybody bend your legs, feet to the floor. Roll to your right off of the support. You can rest your head in your right arm. Stay there for a few breaths. Bend the legs closer to the chest if the lower back feels tight. Now, I've mentioned this before. The reason we're asked to roll to the right as opposed to the left is because, again, the position of the heart. When you roll to the right, the heart is still is not suddenly sort of pushed with blood. It's a little easier on the nervous system to roll to the right in this situation. Press the hands down, come to sitting. Come to a comfortable seated position. You can sit on your support if you want. For a moment, sit straight and tall, comfortable cross-legged position. As we do at the beginning of class, let the backs of the hands rest on the knees or on the thighs. Close your eyes. Be a witness, be the seer to the scene, be a witness to the experience of the body. And again, look sort of in terms of comparisons to how the mind and the body feels now compared to the way it did an hour ago. And try to let this samskara, this impression of this new state, deepen into the body, into the mind, into the body. Observe the subtle sense of quietness that maybe is there that wasn't there an hour ago. Bring the palms together at your chest. Practice gratitude. Take a moment. Be grateful for having a body that's healthy and strong enough to take a class like this in the mind and the will to bring you here. Take a moment to be grateful for friends, for family, comforts, security. And I'm grateful for all of you. Thank you. Namaste.